Oh, there it is. Yeah, verse 10 talks about Ashtoreth. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtoreth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. I know it wasn't crazy. So yeah, so that there in verse 10 there talks about the other gods. So those are three places, multiple places where the three gods are talked about. So we got Ashtoreth, Beelzebub, and Dagon. So obviously they had a lot of false gods going on in their worship, right? So we're going to look at some other, I guess, qualities or acts of these Philistines. Let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 19 through 21. Something else that they commonly did, their type of worship. Okay, so chapter 19. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? And the Lord said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thine hand. And David came to Bel Perazim, and David smote them there, and said, The Lord hath broken forth upon my enemies before me, as the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. So they had been basically taking some images and carrying them along with them. So that's kind of part, they kind of trusted in their images. They trusted in these amulets and different things. And this was, to me, pretty fascinating, this next part. A lot of people think, now, when you think of Philistines, you think of like kind of like brutes and, I mean, what do you perceive as a, type of, what are Philistine people to you? Well, when you think of a Philistine, what do you think of? Any adjectives out there? What do you guys think? Huh? Okay, good. What's that? Combative. Good, yeah. Would you consider them kind of intellectual or not so much? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, they actually had a pretty advanced society. And if you look in 1 Samuel chapter 13, this is what was really interesting to me. Israel didn't have a lot of iron weapons, but they did. The Philistines did, and they were pretty advanced in that. But look at 1 Samuel chapter 13 to 19 through 22. Okay. See, and it says, Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, Lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share, and his coulter, and his axe, and his mattocks. So they must have had a place to sharpen things there. Yet they had a file for the mattocks, and for the coulters, and for the forks, and for the axes, and to sharpen the goads. So it came to pass in the day of battle, there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any people that were with Saul and Jonathan. But with Saul and with Jonathan his son was there found. So basically they had two swords, is what this is saying. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the passage of Michmash. So they had two swords, and I think it had, I'm not sure where it says it there. Basically they had 600 soldiers though, is what basically they had there. So 600 soldiers and two swords. That's what they basically, the Israelites had. So, we looked at 15. Oh, let's go up to verse. Let's go up to verse 15. That's where it talks about that. Yeah, there it is. And Samuel arose and got him up from Gilgal unto Gibeah of Benjamin, and Saul numbered the people that were present with him, about 600 men. So they had 600 men, right, and two swords for that many men. Isn't that crazy? Going to battle against Philistines that had all kinds of iron and weapons and all that. So you see that there's quite a big reason to fear, maybe, if you're an Israelite, going after Philistines that have better weapons than you, right? So, but of course, if our faith is in our weapons, and that's a problem right there, right? Their faith has to be in what? What's that? That's right. That's exactly right. So it doesn't matter what weapons they have, right? Yeah. So, so they also have pretty advanced architecture. They enjoyed a lot of booze and drinking and those types of things. But still, they were foreigners in the land of God, and the land of God that was promised to Israel. And of course, Yahweh was eventually going to humble them. Now, some of these prophecies were kind of interesting to me too. We can take a look at Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 11 through 14, which refer to the Philistines. Some of these prophecies were already fulfilled, and then, from what I understand, some of the other ones are kind of in future to be fulfilled. And now we have, of course, currently a land of Palestine, which means land of the Philistines. That's one definition I've heard. So that's current day right now, right? We have Palestinians and all that. But Isaiah 11 chapter, and then verse 11 through 14. It shall come to pass in the day of the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, and from Pethros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The enemy also of Ephraim shall depart, the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, Judah shall not vex Ephraim. But they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. They shall spoil them of the east together. They shall lay their hand upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river. Shall smite it in the seven streams, and make men go over dry shod. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. So that's there's a lot of different prophecies in Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zephaniah, Obadiah, Amos, Zechariah that talk about the Philistines also, but we're not going to read all of those. I don't know. I think I'd like to hear from you guys. As a Christian, how does this kind of I guess relate to us? Would you say? What do you think?
One of the things he says it right there. He's going to be able to travel, call people from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
As he says, in the four corners.
Yeah.
And back then, people were thinking, other side of the world or other countries.
Mm-hmm.
But he says he even says it right there.
Mm-hmm.
From the four corners of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be calling you from everywhere.
Yeah.
Not just here.
Yeah. Talking about the remnant of his people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Calling you from everywhere. So he knew he was going to spread out. And he knew his people would go out there to different countries and different cities,
Mm-hmm.
different parts of the world,
Yeah.
and bring him out there.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I've never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
But in all the Bible verses I've read and heard, it's the first time I've heard about that
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's a lot of interesting prophecies. But yeah, I think God's calling people from a lot of different lands, right? But this is kind of talking about judgment, I think, on, some of the, enemies. Like here it says in verse 14, but they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west, and they shall spoil them of the east together. They shall lay their hand upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. And then in verse 15, the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the seven streams, and make men go over dry shod. So some of it I think is judgment, but yeah, I think you're right too, that God's calling people from all lands, right, to know Him and to be saved. So, yeah. That's good. Yeah, so let's look at also, maybe look at another one. Isaiah chapter 14. We'll look at 28 through 31. Through 31.
28?
28 through 31. Verse 28 through 31. Chapter 14. So here, again, we're talking about Palestine, Philistines, prophecies relating to them. Verse 29, verse 28, let's start 28. And the year that King Ahaz died was this burden. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, or Palestine, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety, and I will kill that root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Howl, O gate, cry, O city, thou whole Palestine art dissolved, for there shall come from the north a smoke, and then shall be alone in his appointed times. What shall one then answer the messenger of the nation, that the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it? So there's a lot of different prophecies kind of like that, just kind of showing judgment against the Philistines, Palestine, and all that. So just want to show you guys that. And just give us a little background on who the Israelites were having to deal with. But with these prophecies in the Old Testament, they have a lot to, I guess you could say, rejoice in, knowing that if they had these enemies, still they'd have the victory, right? Trusting God and His promises. So that's the key, even as a Christian, right? We have to trust His promises, not our circumstances, our situation, our abilities, right? So, I think I'll stop there because we kind of started a little bit late. I know that some people gotta go, but let's maybe do some praises, praise reports, prayer requests. Anybody have any?